going to read is one of my own. We're going to do two poems of my own and then one from Poetry International, which is available in the back if you'd like to purchase that, if you're not already an MFA student at SDSU. Inelegant Proof is my first poem. Trying desperately to add 3 and 4 to make it to the next week. The proof is in the trees, they survive regardless, growing larger with the rotation of the earth. I too am disappearing to an inelegant proof of my existence. God is to me as waffle is to butter, iron, cone. There's something inelegant about the human threshold. Can't drink a gallon of milk, can't swallow a spoonful of cinnamon. The waters of the great flood must have saved the righteous, but not the milk-guzzling strong. Thank you. This next one I'm going to read is called Marita. It's a prose poem, you can tell because there are no lineations. Marita. Marita hid with the monster in her closet. He looked like an iguana but larger and with a sheep's head. He spoke to her in a foreign language she didn't know, whispering in her ear like a dog whittles a bone. She fell in love and introduced the monster to her family the following week. Her father, a collector of old newspaper clippings from World War II and the occasional swastika, mumbled a few obscenities. Her mother, a collector of vintage buttons, said 14 Hail Marys and crossed herself countless times. Marita married the monster 3 days later. On their honeymoon, the monster stayed under the bed, weeping. He was afraid to be loved. When Marita finally coaxed him out, he was a puddle of tears. She scooped the tears into the bucket and drank them. She became whole again. And the last poem I'm going to read, thank you, is from Poetry International, available in the back for $20. It's Guilt and Passion by Taman Shalamun. I knew I'd screw that up. Translated by Michael Thomas. Town traffic vehicles are green. The moon is full. Watch out! I set you a trap. With my greediness, not your fertility, I struggle. My pneumonia rolls you in spaces that cannot be grasped with your senses. I'm wounded. Watch out! I see far. It's true that they whispered. It's true what they whispered. I'm the Lord who disposes the gleam of others. Watch out! I'm warning you. You push aside your wounds because you fell asleep in the crystal. I give to seize. I open up you and to pierce through you, to break the baseline of time, as this is right. Thank you.
So I'm also going to read 2 poems and then one from our PI. And as you can see, this is my journal from classes that we pick apart, and this was a prompt that Piotr gave to me. And the first one is called Savage River. Down the Savage River, Suffolk women are sawing cattails into bassinets, chilling their nail beds with hastened steel, shrugging slugs, for they have to. My mother said, savage streams can be kind. Once in a yellow moon, a woman will fill her bassinet with a shallow infant. This one is called Facing the End of a Pickup Truck. Sweet rumbling left without me, and the farm is far less needy by the morning red-hatched barn. Memories wake where barefoot trolls over quarter-horse heels, where the curves of cattle blur, rot away, mock the hay, brittle gristle stacked, where memories settle, where paths have been padded. Every line to the old barn, perforated, once a home, a sanctuary, now hung. We slung on inside the howling brattle, an unmade bed, marks the head of my mother, gnawing at the sheet ends of my father's cloak. We people come back as family. I believe each disgusting oddity should be uncovered. I chose a poem called The Book of Seven Lives by Ming Dai, I believe. D-I, Dai. I'm looking at you.
Yes.
Thank you. And it was self-translated, which I think is awesome and interesting. The Book of Seven Lives. I'm too close to the sun, and they say I'll go blind. So I appear in many movies as an old man, endless gray hair and beard, eyes like hollows, mouthing prophecies. Apollo is born today. Tomorrow a stone will be declared the sun. I also appear in many poems, occasionally glamorous, mostly worse than a witch. Today my breast age, tomorrow my breast wrinkle. So I put on a firm smile and walk the road in a bucket skirt. Only Virginia Woolf sees me, the me that codes words, the me that loves straight, holy, readily believing in love, and can write right, not for name, not for fame, just write right, and can change overnight. Oh no, 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 not again. So wonderful to stay in this life. Zeus gave me 7 lives, but nothing is better than this life. This life of tiger or wolf. I fear sleep, fear waking up with an old face, wearing T.S. Eliot's grimace, my body dusted with his cigarette ash.
What I'm going to do, Night Flight's a recent book. I'll just read a few poems from that. But I've written from so many different places. I'm just going to kind of do a little variety, I think. But I will open with a poem called The Ache, and it's the opening poem of Night Flight. Night Flight is basically divided into 2 sections. One, more or less, poems conceived or written or that come out of my life on the East Coast here, around, and then poems that, again, there's some overlap coming from the European experience. And this is called The Ache, and it evokes the area where I lived in Appalachia. The Ache. The river flows like a silver quill into an inkwell of woods and words. Fording evening as it deepens, an old woman, no more than a synonym for snow, tunes her stone bow to death's dark song as it quickens. The quarter moon grins over lush leaves and listens to the frogs peep, the decoys dive, the carp's dreams. And a black snake glistens down the sycamore's skin like a rainbow into water, into nothing, while the river contrails through the blue shivering vein of your aching. Time, never green, fish, belly up, until at last you understand the majestic indifference of the promised land, its blue flowers, quiet horses, the rising sun. This poem, written some years ago when after I first moved to Europe, it's called Duet. It's kind of a schizo-doppelganger poem, in a way. But it's going away and then coming back to meet myself back in here. And the only character in here you may or you may not know is Ugolino. And I first discovered him in Divine Comedy many years ago. He's in the 9th circle, and he's condemned to eating someone's brain. That was his friend at one time, but his children were condemned with him, and they wanted him to eat them to stay alive. He refused, but he did nibble his fingers. But in this poem, I have him maybe gnawing his fingers. It's called Duet. After a score of years, when I return to the mountains to find him, he'll still be here by the muddy creek, I'm sure. He'll look up and say, "Where have you been friend. It's been a long coffee break. Then we'll hunker down to break bread and tell each other all about the wind that took us down like leaves. Him to stay here, to bait his god, fishing rod and worm, and his companion, blown to the four quarters, mulch for a food chain of metaphysical grubs. They eat away at the soul as mechanically as Ugolino eats his own self-serving flesh and blood. When I lived in these hills, it was more hill country, you know the Appalachian Mountains, they're not so big, but it's where I come from, so it was easy. I had gone away, and then I came back, built a cabin, Had 10 acres, lived there more or less 20 years, traveled around. But there were lots of animals, of course, there. It was pretty wild. And groundhogs everywhere, but of course they can live in the suburbs. And I'm going to dedicate this to Jenny because she's into horses, and groundhogs are, I guess gophers out here are terrible for horses with the holes in the ground and this. And I'd have to shoot them quite often, which was no problem. They're, maybe you see they're big and fat, but they can climb trees, and they would always climb the orchard and eat the fruit. So I cooked them. They taste like bear. Everyone was laughing when I was saying what they do. They're fatty. You have to cook them twice, skim off the fat, recook it. Delicious. And my friend I was living with was very good at tanning, so I even have in Lithuania a nice drum skin, like tambourine, made from groundhog. I think it's the only groundhog in Lithuania. This is for Thoreau, who you may know, and Walden wrote about a woodchuck that he was observing. Springtime at the edge of paradise. Today I watched my groundhog come out of its hole in the orchard. It wasn't as fat as I am from shoving too many nerves in my mouth, its mouth, over the holiday family get-togethers. Nor did it have the desultory air of a bookworm or peach-fed dilettante. Actually, it looked more like a bloated digger wasp or a compacted hairy debutante. Maybe these descriptions aren't that far off. Anyway, the only thing I'll say we had in common was that I blustered a cloud around my brow that somehow resembled the shadow it dragged from hole to hole like a downcast rain cloud hexed out of Eden's angelic garden. This poem is called Experience, but it's really 3 separate poems. So the first one they're all short little ones. It's kind of metaphorical, leaping around, a little bit of surreal, dreamy. The second one takes place, it's very autobiographical, in the basement of the Smithsonian Contemporary Art Museum in Washington, where I was down there roaming around with a friend. You're not supposed to be down there, but we were. And the third one is about an old buddy of mine who was a detective who tried to hook up with Ophelia and what happened to him. So first, the world is seen from the back of a fox with its tail caught and bleeding in the door of a henhouse. When she lost her pet testicles in the sledding accident, the question arose as how to regenerate a less conspicuous pair of sunglasses, more mauve, the veins separating the bifocals from the snow and the guacamole. 2, boxes and breasts. This is the Smithsonian. Took down the Cornell box, tilted it, watched for the music inside. It was no dream. I stood up awake with Joseph in the tomb of the Smithsonian. Soon, emboldened by their voluptuousness, fondled the breasts of a nearby Rodin. You can't do that in a regular museum. In the basement you can get away with it. And this is my poor buddy. It's called International Inquirer. A detective goes searching for the flowers in Ophelia's hair. Suddenly they appear, drenched in a sunny kerchief of dead fish. He does not want to be the butt of a joke, absurd in the current events of a tabloid. Reluctantly, he eats one of the fish, finds Ophelia's corpse. They live happily ever after. Portraits of a woman in grotesques. Grotesques here comes from grotto, or little decorative, sometimes pieces of art, you could say, but usually some pattern with lots of foliage, demons, people, and they're in the art world they're called grotesques. So I made these little portraits to kind of give me some distance over one of the most important relationships in my life, and it broke up, and I was really down, and I wrote this many years later. The only word you may not know towards the end is globus hystericus. It's when you lose your voice. I lost my voice for about 7 months. I could still talk a little bit, but after this happened. So this is called Portrait of a Woman in Grotesques. For Anna Plorabelle. Perhaps this adolescent queen of smiles from the Delphic denizens of Fishtown should be posed there in front of a row of brick houses, and not disposed here on memory's disconsolate screen. But let us begin. Kneeling in the garden, slender bronze fingers clipping cilantro, last rays of the sun scratching the scriptural body of the earth. Moon ballooning, bloodshot in the west, and she turns to face east, and at first one barely sees the cut iris sheathed in her breast. Swallows and bats gliding, swooping, but see how she stretches like a sleepy lizard in a sandbox and mockingly sticks out her tongue at a horsefly that won't leave her alone. Nothing elusive about the charms of her flesh, as perfumed as the flowering quince, as enticingly pungent as its fruit fallen on the grass on the outskirts of the city of love. Rabbits on the lawn in rut, thumping and frolicking back and forth to the hedge of fairy roses. And she is like a potted palm tree idling on the veranda to gather the night air, host a green shimmer of fireflies. Ragged seams of coal share the flute-like warble of a high C in her voice, as this goddess nervously laughs in the midst of her rendition of the House of the Rising Sun. Snow-white teeth necklaced into the skull, cheekbones tawny omelets of ivory, and the neck pure Modigliani stretched across vocal cords, honeycombed and poisoned with lice-like tapioca pearls. Seldom nude, but often naked, she would lie as still as a possum, as the feather duster of my tongue traced her delicate hairline from vulva to breast, and then rested over her jugular. Halloween, and after gripping an apple with slightly bucked bunny teeth from a bucket of icy water, she grins out the window like a jack-o'-lantern at the scarecrow standing on the decimated crossbones of the Polonia, blueprinting this portrait and drinking a bud. Years ago, I smashed my voice in a prolonged fit of globus hystericus, going over her loveliness, her intelligence and grace. And so now my preference is to fabricate semi-detached still lifes, these sundry miscarried grotesques. Maybe I'll dedicate this one too to Ilya. He seemed to like it. It's called Tennessee Williams Comes to Mulberry Street. I grew up on a street in Pennsylvania, lived there until I went away to the university. It was called Mulberry Street. But Tennessee Williams, in his plays, and if you read about him, his life seemed similar to mine in a way, the domestic life and his relations with his mother. So this is a little play, very short one. Tennessee Williams Comes to Mulberry Street. Scene: mother's and father's bedroom, 1964 or thereabouts. Mother in a nightgown holds son's diary, screaming because he has a girlfriend. Son is still a virgin. Action. Tomcat, you're nothing but a tomcat, she hisses, then calls him Judas, her hand raised to slap his cheek. He doesn't turn it, but grabs her wrists and spits between them on the floor. The line, a mere puddle in liquid drawn, he half turns to exit, then stops, and beside himself, stock still in fear and loathing, he watches in her eyes a kitten about to drown. He leaves, she remains, and then the curtain comes down. Denouement. The audience gets up to protest. Another ridiculous Oedipus. The doors are locked. Now the whole theater is in the round. No one exits from this. So that's your play.